distant past, to the east of Westeros, on the continent of Essos, there was a magnificent city known as Valyria, the Freehold. This city was famous for its stunning architecture, scorching flames, powerful dragons. Valyria was a place filled with magic and legend, and within this breathtaking city lived a prominent noble family, the Targaryens. The men and women of House Targaryen possessed extraordinary beauty and elegance, their silver or platinum hair shimmering brightly in the sunlight, and their violet eyes as deep as the night sky, revealing an indescribable allure. Their appearance was just the beginning of their remarkable qualities, for each member of the family had a unique gift, an incredible resistance to fire and heat. This was the blood of the dragon that flowed through their veins, allowing them to stand out in a world fraught with danger. Why did House Targaryen leave the eastern peninsula of Valyria to invade Westeros? How did they manage to conquer the Seven Kingdoms and dominate the continent, with the undeniable advantage of dragons as a formidable force? Why did they later lose the Iron Throne and face near extinction? This is the captivating legendary story we bring to you today. On the vast lands of Essos in the east, three powerful civilizations thrived. The Giscari Empire, which controlled much of the region. The Andals practiced a feudal system of knights. And the Rhoynar, who lived along the banks of the Rhoyne River and pursued gender equality. Each of these civilizations possessed unique cultures and beliefs, but their fates were destined to intertwine with a new force, the Valyrians. In ancient times, the 14 fires of the Valyrian peninsula stood quietly under the blue sky, the smoke from the volcanoes swirling in the sunlight, as if guarding an ancient secret. This land was an unknown territory for the Valyrians, yet a turning point in their fate was hidden within these potentially explosive mountains. One day, a group of Valyrian explorers wandered through the mountains, searching for new resources and habitats. Suddenly, the ground trembled, rocks collapsed, and a brilliant light shot forth from deep within the mountain. The explorers nervously yet curiously approached the light source, eventually discovering several enormous dragon eggs in a hidden cave. This discovery was like a thunderbolt, instantly changing their destinies. To protect these precious dragon eggs, the Valyrians decided to establish a city between the fires, naming it Valyria, the Freehold. In this city, flames and dragon shadows intertwined, symbolizing power and hope. The establishment of the Freehold marked the beginning of the Valyrians' journey, filled with glory and challenges. However, the early years were far from smooth. The Valyrians faced threats from powerful neighboring civilizations, the slave system of the Giscari Empire, and the feudalism of the Andals weighed heavily on them. In such an environment, the future of the Valyrians seemed uncertain, with the shadow of extinction looming over them. As time passed, the Valyrians dedicated themselves to taming the giant dragons. These creatures, with their immense destructive power and superior intelligence, became the Valyrians' greatest weapons. After countless attempts and efforts, the Valyrian dragon lords finally established a deep bond with their dragons. This special relationship not only multiplied their strength, but also earned them the respect of other civilizations. With the protection of the dragons, the Valyrians began to expand into the surrounding lands. Their cities sprang up like mushrooms after rain, and Valyria emerged as a rising power. Mounted on their dragons, the Valyrian knights became messengers of fire and storm, embarking on their path of expansion. Their target was the Giscari Empire, once an unstoppable force. With their control over dragons, the Valyrians swiftly conquered the Giscari Empire, shaking the foundations of its entrenched slave system. As the Valyrians expanded their influence with the power of dragons, other civilizations in Essos sensed a profound crisis. The rise of Valyria was like a powerful tide, impacting surrounding kingdoms and tribes, forcing them to take action against this undeniable threat. Among the Andals in western Essos, their deep faith in the Seven made them consider themselves the chosen people of destiny. However, the rapid rise of the Valyrians unsettled them. In search of new homes and better opportunities for survival, many Annals decided to migrate to Westeros, hoping to establish a new life on lands untouched by the Valyrians. These migrants formed tight alliances during their journey, filled with hope for their homeland and dreams for the future. Although they knew the road ahead would be challenging, they firmly believed that the protection of the Seven would guide them toward the light. Meanwhile, the Rhoynar living along the banks of the Rhoyne also felt the threat from Valyria. They valued gender equality and freedom, with a strong sense of unity. To protect their land and culture, they decided to gather their forces and prepare to confront the impending Valyrian invaders. Warrior Queen Nymeria led approximately 300,000 elite troops, aiming directly for Valyria's largest city, Volantis. Nymeria was a formidable and wise queen who understood the importance of this war. She inspired her soldiers, emphasizing that this was not merely a battle, but a defense of their beliefs and homeland. She conveyed determination and courage to every soldier, telling them, "We are not fighting. We are fighting for our future." As night fell, Nymeria's army surged toward Volantis, ready to face the upcoming conflict. She was filled with faith, believing that justice would triumph over evil. Though the enemy was powerful, she trusted that their unity would help them confront the dragons and Valyrian forces. When Nymeria's army reached Volantis, the air was thick with tension. The towering Valyrian city loomed, and dragons circled in the sky, seemingly preparing for the impending battle. The Valyrian army, commanded by dragon lords, was orderly and exhibited unmatched combat prowess. As the battle horn sounded, Nymeria led her troops into a courageous charge. The warriors fought valiantly, but facing the fury of hundreds of dragons, the battlefield quickly descended into chaos. Flames erupted, and many Rhoynar soldiers were turned to ash in an instant. Despite Nymeria's army's bravery, the power of the Valyrians was beyond imagination. The battle raged for days, and eventually, Nymeria realized that they could not withstand a Valyrian invasion. Although her heart was filled with resentment and anger, she had to order a retreat to save her tribe. Amidst the ashes of battle, Nymeria and her soldiers were forced to flee south to Dorne in Westeros. They lost their homes and families in the storm and flames, but Nymeria was determined that a new beginning awaited them ahead. In Dorne, they established a new refuge, and Nymeria vowed never to let anyone infringe upon their freedom and beliefs again. She shared their story with the new inhabitants, inspiring unity and the reconstruction of their former glory. Despite experiencing a devastating war, Nymeria and her people found hope in their new land. Future challenges still lay ahead, but their courage and unity would guide them into a new chapter. Though the Valyrian expansion came at a heavy cost, it also taught them the importance of freedom and faith, making them a new force in Dorne. As the Valyrians rose in power, their influence spread throughout the entire Essos continent. Every conquered city became their colony, and the Valyrians established numerous burgeoning cities, forming a vast colonial empire. Along their journey, they not only conquered their enemies but also absorbed the cultures of other civilizations, strengthening their own. In Dorne, Nymeria ultimately married into House Martell of Sunspear, helping to unify all of Dorne. This union became a crucial turning point in Dornish history, laying the groundwork for future developments. As time passed, the Valyrians not only ruled the central western regions of Essos, but also became the dominant power of the entire continent. In this process, they not only rewrote their destiny, but also transformed the future of the surrounding civilizations. At the height of the Valyrian Freehold, the prosperity and power of this city instilled awe in all its neighboring countries. However, beneath this glorious facade, dark currents were stirring, and the shadow of disaster was quietly approaching. The morning sun shone through the mountains, bathing the lands of Valyria in a gentle and tranquil light. Yet beneath this peaceful exterior lay the impending disaster. The 14 flame peaks, standing at the center of the Valyrian peninsula, were the birthplace of countless legends. But on this morning, they resembled a sleeping giant, quietly brewing a cataclysm. Boom! A deafening roar shattered the stillness, as if the very heavens were collapsing. The tranquility was torn apart in an instant. The roar of the volcano echoed like thunder. Thick smoke enveloped the sky like a black curtain, and blinding flames surged into the air, threatening to swallow the entire world. Lava poured down like a raging tide, consuming every inch of the city. The residents of Valyria were immersed in their daily routines, unaware of the approaching calamity. Suddenly, the ground began to shake violently. Buildings trembled and collapsed. Streets cracked and flames erupted from the earth as if the land were screaming. The splendor of the city was reduced to nothingness in the blaze. The once bustling markets, magnificent palaces, and ancient temples were all swallowed in an instant. The cries, weeping and terror of the people intertwined into a mournful symphony as the air became thick with despair. In this disaster, many Valyrians and their dragons were unable to escape. The roars of the dragons echoed in the sky, yet even these powerful beings could not flee the catastrophe. Flames and lava turned their nests to ashes, and the once majestic figures that circled in the sky now left behind endless desolation. The volcanic eruption triggered not only the outpouring of lava, but also a series of massive earthquakes. The earth was continually torn apart. The foundations of the city crumbled under the tremors, and the former splendor was instantly transformed into a wasteland. Valyria's lands were ripped apart, rivers were diverted, mountains flattened, and the former glory and brilliance turned to dust in this calamity. Those who survived witnessed it all, their hearts filled with helplessness and despair. The myth of Valyria collapsed in an instant. The once great power and glory were gone, leaving only unbearable pain and loss. People began to understand that the once mighty dragons and gods could not save them, and the wheel of fate turned cruelly at that moment. After the cataclysm, Valyria became desolate, its former splendor now non-existent. Survivors searched for hope in the ruins, the road to rebuilding long and arduous. However, a new belief ignited in their hearts to carry on Valyria's history and legends. Among the ruins, people began to tell those ancient stories, recounting the valor of dragons and the splendor of Valyria. They knew that although everything had changed, the spirit of Valyria still existed in memory and legend. In this disaster known as the Doom, most Valyrians and their dragons perished. At that moment, the former strength and glory turned to ash in the flames, and all myths collapsed. With the destruction of Valyria, the situation in Essos underwent dramatic changes. The Dothraki, from the vast plains, rode their horses and wielded their curved swords, beginning their conquest of cities once ruled by Valyria. Over the course of 100 years, the Dothraki, with their unparalleled combat prowess, gradually occupied several cities that once belonged to Valyria, and new overlords began to rise. Within the high walls of the Valyrian Freehold lived a young girl named Daenerys Targaryen. Her family was known for its silver hair and purple eyes. But Daenerys possessed a unique aura. She was referred to as the Dreamer. Her dreams often foretold the future, yet despite her praised abilities, many remained skeptical of her prophecies. One quiet night, Daenerys fell into a deep sleep and entered a dream filled with fire and smoke. In her dream, she saw the Valyrian Freehold burning in flames. The once great city instantly reduced to nothingness, surrounded by despairing cries and helpless struggles. She saw her beloved home consumed by the wrath of the volcano, a strong sense of crisis jolting her awake, filled with unease. This is no ordinary dream, Daenerys shouted within herself, understanding what it meant. She immediately dressed and ran to find her father, Rhoynar, her heart ignited with hope for rescue. When Daenerys found Rhoynar, it was dawn, and the sunlight streamed through the window onto his face. She anxiously said, "Father, I had a terrible dream. Valyria is about to be destroyed. We must leave here." Rhoynar paused from his work, listening intently to his daughter's warning. He understood Daenerys' abilities and knew she had never missed a prophecy. "We must warn others," he said. "Tell them danger is coming." However, when they conveyed this message at a gathering of the nobles, they were met with mockery and doubt. Many nobles dismissed her dream as nonsense, and some even ridiculed, "Are we to abandon our wealth and glory for a little girl's dream?" Faced with the disdain of those around her, Daenerys felt immense disappointment, but her father remained steadfast. He understood that power and wealth could not withstand the impending disaster. "I believe you, Daenerys," Rhoynar said firmly. "No matter what others think, we cannot take that risk." So, he began to sell their possessions to prepare the funds and supplies needed for their escape. Their family, along with 5 dragons, including the powerful Balerion, became their most precious assets. Daenerys' determination and her father's trust became their driving force for fleeing. After several weeks of preparation, Rhoynar took Daenerys and other family members on their journey to Dragonstone. On the day they left Valyria, Daenerys looked back with feelings of reluctance and fear. She sensed that the fate of that city was tightly intertwined with her own, but she knew that only by fleeing could they preserve their lives and hopes. Upon reaching Dragonstone, Daenerys still found it hard to let go. Although safe, she deeply understood that her prophecies were not over. The future remained uncertain, and the impending disaster continued to echo in her heart. Years later, just as Daenerys had dreamt, the Valyrian Freehold was destroyed in the cataclysm. Those who had mocked her became dust, victims of history. Daenerys and her family began a new life on Dragonstone, working tirelessly to protect their 5 dragons, waiting for the challenges and opportunities that lay ahead. Daenerys' prophecies and her father's choices became the turning point in Valyria's fate. She realized that although destiny brought great pain, she also became the hope and savior of her family. On the road ahead, Daenerys would continue to fight for her family and for the voices that had been ignored. Rhoynar endured immense pressure and mockery during their escape, but he never wavered. He was honored as Rhoynar the Exile, and the Targaryen family thus became the last dragon lords in the world. Among the ruins of Valyria, they were survivors, the bearers of fire and blood. Meanwhile, another noble family, the Valyrian family, also survived the disaster. It was rumored that the Valyrian family had migrated to Driftmark before Rhoynar led his family to settle on Dragonstone. Their close ties with the Targaryen family, along with their immense wealth and powerful navy, paved the way for future restoration. In the tranquil life on Dragonstone, the members of House Targaryen continue to uphold their ancient traditions and enjoy their close relationship with dragons. On this historic land, family emblem, a 3-headed dragon spewing fire in red on a black background, reminds every Targaryen of the belief that blood and fire are one. In the morning light of Dragonstone, the young Aegon Targaryen stands at the edge of a cliff, the sea breeze caressing his silver hair, gazing out at the vast ocean before him. His thoughts drift back to his childhood, memories of adventures with his sister Visenya and his younger sister Rhaenys flooding back. Aegon's sister Visenya was always filled with courage and a passion for exploration. One year, they set out on a journey, sailing westward until they reached the expansive Westeros. Along the way, they traveled through many kingdoms, experiencing the customs and cultures of the 7 kingdoms. Each place was like a painting, showcasing different histories and traditions. On a summer day, they arrived in the Stormlands, witnessing the arrogance and pride of King Argilac. The king boasted of his power at a grand feast, yet his castle seemed so fragile when a storm approached. Aegon thought to himself that such arrogance would only lead to ruin. During one of their travels, Aegon, Visenya, and Rhaenys visited the citadel. The wisdom and knowledge there deeply captivated them. History and faith, discussing the teachings of the seven and ancient legends. Aegon listened intently to the passionate discussions, continually reflecting on the nature of power and responsibility. An old scholar told them, "Power is a double-edged sword. If the wielder is not careful, they will inevitably reap what they sow." This statement took root in Aegon's heart, serving as a reminder of the challenges and choices he would face in the future. Throughout their journey, they witnessed the struggles and conflicts between kingdoms. The Stark family in the north and the Lannister family in the south fought over power, vying against each other, while the common people suffered in the flames of war. Each time Aegon saw innocent civilians losing their homes to conflict, his heart filled with a mix of anger and sympathy, gradually forming a desire for unity. He confided in Visenya and Rhaenys, "If we could unite these kingdoms, perhaps we could avoid needless wars and suffering." His sister Rhaenys worriedly replied, "But how could this be achieved? Different beliefs and interests will make unity difficult." As time passed, Aegon's reflections on Westeros deepened. He understood that true unity is not merely a display of power, but a combination of wisdom and trust. He began to construct a dream in his heart, a Westeros free of conflict and chaos, a homeland where everyone could live better. The young Aegon often stood on the heights of Dragonstone, gazing into the distance toward Westeros, dreaming of the day he could ride a dragon and wield a Valyrian sword to lead his family and people toward a new future. He knew he bore the responsibility of his family, and the seed of unity was quietly growing within him. In this process, the support of his sister Visenya and Rhaenys became a vital force in strengthening his beliefs. The three shared dreams and hopes, planning their future together on this lonely island. The bond among the three siblings grew ever deeper, laying a solid foundation for their future journey. As time went on, Aegon's conviction about the future grew stronger. He began to think about how to turn that seed into reality. To achieve his dreams, he must prepare for the challenges to come. Upon returning to Dragonstone, Aegon had a giant table carved in the shape of Westeros. There were no boundary markers, reflecting his deepest desire that Westeros should be unified. The conflicts and divisions of the Western continent further strengthened Aegon's resolve. As the leader of the family, Aegon was tall and handsome, with purple eyes and silver gold hair that shone in the sunlight. He wore black scale armor and wielded the Valyrian steel sword Blackfire, radiating an irresistible charm and authority. He was a man of both charisma and dominance, with a burning desire for conquest in his heart. House Targaryen had long adhered to the tradition of sibling marriage to maintain pure bloodlines. Aegon married both his sister and his younger sister, a rare occurrence, but in his heart, the unity and strength of family were paramount. Beside him was his close friend, Orys Baratheon, the future founder of House Baratheon. Their friendship was deep, and rumors suggested that Orys might be Aegon's illegitimate brother. It was through his relationship with Orys that Aegon's plans for conquest began to take shape, igniting his pursuit of a unified Westeros. During their time on Dragonstone, House Targaryen was accompanied by 5 dragons, but 4 perished one after another, leaving only Balerion, known as the Black Dread. As the leader of the dragons, Balerion was not only enormous, his wings cast shadows over the land, but he also possessed unparalleled strength and intelligence. His fire was like a torrent of flames, capable of instantly destroying any obstacle. Legend has it that this dragon was a gift from the Valyrian gods, a symbol of the Targaryen family's power. Under Balerion's protection, the Targaryens hatched 2 dragon eggs, with Meraxes and Vagar becoming the mounts of Rhaenys and Visenya, respectively. These 3 dragons would pave the way for the Targaryen family's revival in the battles to come. As time passed, Aegon's determination grew even stronger. He realized that the unification of Westeros was not just about family glory, but also a responsibility to the entire continent. A burning desire for conquest filled his heart, and his gaze was bright with visions of the future. Under Aegon's leadership, the story of House Targaryen would continue to unfold, awaiting the moment they would embark on the journey to conquer Westeros. All of this was for the glory of the family and the legacy of blood and fire. With the howling wind and the roaring dragons, House Targaryen's journey was about to begin, and the legend of Valyria would once again resurface on the stage of history. During the days on Dragonstone, the ambitions of the Targaryen family grew ever larger. Young Aegon Targaryen, with his purple eyes and silver gold hair, burned with a desire to conquer Westeros. His dragons were not only symbols of his power, but also the foundation of his rule. Just as this dragon king was planning his conquest, King Argilac Durandon of the Stormlands unexpectedly proposed a marriage alliance, hoping to protect his kingdom through this union. In the royal palace of the Stormlands, King Argilac Durandon looked troubled as he stood on the high balcony, overlooking the nearly completed Harrenhal. The grand castle symbolized immense power and defense, but in Argilac's heart, it felt like a looming shadow that could swallow his kingdom at any moment. As a king with only daughters, he understood the significance of the castle, but feared even more the conquering eyes of those, especially the Targaryens. "They will come for my princess and seize my kingdom," he muttered to himself, filled with dread. To protect his daughter and his kingdom, he decided to seek a powerful ally, Aegon Targaryen, the Dragon King and Knight of Dragon. Argilac sent a plea for help to Aegon, requesting a marriage alliance with the Targaryens to strengthen his rule. In his mind, this was a win-win arrangement. However, when Aegon's envoy arrived at Storm's End, they brought an unexpected proposal. Aegon not only sought to marry the princess, but also demanded that Argilac cede more lands to strengthen his power, while arranging for the princess to marry his close friend, Orys Baratheon. This demand hit Argilac like a resounding slap, stinging his pride. "You insult me," Argilac thundered, his voice booming like thunder. He could not tolerate such a demand as a proud king. He would never allow his dignity to be infringed. Aegon clouded his judgment, and he ordered that the envoy's hands be cut off as a warning to Aegon, subsequently sending back the blood-stained letter, firmly stating that he would never allow his daughter to marry a bastard. This incident quickly reached Dragonstone, and Aegon's anger flared like a wildfire. He stood on the rocks of Dragonstone, his expression dark and his gaze fixed on the horizon. He understood that the lords and nobles of Westeros were arrogant and ignorant, only realizing their mistakes when faced with the threat of death. "These people are utterly foolish," Aegon roared, determination hardening in his heart. He recognized that Aegir's pride would only lead to greater tragedy. He began to think of how to turn this insult into an opportunity to unify Westeros. "They think they can treat me as they wish, not knowing I have 3 dragons behind me," Aegon silently vowed, his anger transforming into a driving force that propelled him forward. He decided to no longer retreat, but to channel this insult into motivation, demonstrating his resolve and power to those lords and nobles. "I will show them that a true dragon king cannot be underestimated," he declared resolutely, his eyes blazing with a desire for conquest. As time passed, Aegon gathered his allies, preparing to turn this foolish insult into a rallying call for war. He knew the moment for conquering Westeros was approaching, and this time, he would not passively wait but take the initiative, proving to everyone that the strength of House Targaryen could not be ignored. Aegon, along with his friends, vassals, and allies, discussed their strategies. They prayed at the Sept of the Seven for guidance. After 7 days, Aegon resolved to send ultimatums to the Citadel and the lords of various kingdoms in Westeros, declaring that this land would be ruled solely by him, becoming the one true king. He promised to preserve the titles and lands of any lord willing to surrender, but warned of severe punishment for those who resisted. Soon after, Aegon and his sisters landed at the mouth of the Blackwater, riding dragons with a small force. This place would one day become the capital of Westeros, King's Landing. Thus began a 2-year campaign of conquest. The spark for all this was not merely the marriage proposal from the Stormlands, but Aegon's inner craving for power. He could no longer endure merely surviving on Dragonstone. The glory of Valyria drove him to take this step. Aegon's confidence in his conquest of Westeros grew stronger. He had flown east to aid the free cities in defeating the powerful Volantis. This battle made him realize that his bond with dragons made him invincible, significantly boosting his confidence. As the call to conquest sounded, the 3 Targaryen dragons descended upon Westeros like thunder from the heavens. Aegon Targaryen rode the majestic Valyrian, leading the mightiest army in Westeros, unstoppable and overwhelming. Except for Dorne in the far south, the other 6 kingdoms had little capacity to resist, and faced with this oncoming force, he felt nothing but terror and despair. The beginning of the war brought various reactions. The kings of the kingdoms faced unprecedented choices: resist or yield. Some kings, like ferocious beasts, defiantly chose to fight for their kingdoms, while others, under the pressure of fear, began to waver. The most notable example was Torrhen Stark, the king in the north. He was a brave and resolute king, known for his pride in the north. Upon hearing of the Targaryen campaign, he decisively marched south with 30,000 elite northern troops, ready to defend the dignity of the north. Leading his army across the vast plains, Torrhen felt increasingly confident as he neared Aegon's forces. However, When he stood on a hillside and beheld Aegon's army, the surge of fear nearly suffocated him. Before him was the tidal wave of Targaryen soldiers, thousands of knights gleaming in armor, and above them, 3 dragons loomed like moving shadows, roaring thunderously and stirring up fierce winds. Torrhen's resolve began to falter. All his courage seemed to evaporate in that moment. He recalled the legends of dragons, their wrath and destruction, and the stories of Harrenhal, turned to ash by fire echoed in his mind. The fear rising within him clouded his judgment. Overnight, Torrhen faced an enormous choice. He paced restlessly in his camp, struggling internally. To continue resisting, risking death in battle, or to choose surrender, possibly preserving his life and the dignity of the North. His generals expressed differing views. Some insisted on resistance while others supported surrender. Ultimately, after much contemplation, Torrhen decided to kneel and surrender. He realized that against the powerful Targaryens, the strength of the North was no longer a match. He brought his 30,000 troops to Aegon, kneeling to acknowledge his allegiance to the Dragon King. "I wish to retain my people's dignity, and am willing to compromise for the future of the North." He spoke softly, his voice tinged with resignation and despair. Torrhen's surrender not only changed the fate of the North, but also triggered a chain reaction among other kingdoms. The kings of the realm witnessed this and began to reconsider their positions, contemplating surrendering to Aegon to ensure the peace of their kingdoms. Aegon, upon accepting Torrhen's surrender, demonstrated both tolerance and wisdom. He promised to preserve the North's lands and titles, granting Torrhen respect and honor. This move not only solidified the rule in the North, but also won House Targaryen more support and trust. The conquest continued to escalate under these circumstances, with Targaryen dragons soaring and destroying all who dared to resist. Faced with the fury of the dragons and the threat of war, the lords and nobles of Westeros finally understood that only by aligning themselves with this powerful new king could they hope to survive on this land. We will later create a film to elaborate on the various exciting details of the conquest of Westeros, but due to the length of the story, we will briefly summarize for now. After the war, Aegon confiscated a vast amount of enemy weapons and returned to King's Landing, using dragon fire to forge the Iron Throne, a symbol of power. To solidify House Targaryen's rule in Westeros, Aegon converted to the faith of the Seven, gaining the support of the Church. Ultimately, he was crowned king by the High Septon in the Starry Sept of Old Town, becoming Aegon I Targaryen. This year is regarded as the first year of Aegon's reign, and he chose to center his new residence, King's Landing, around Aegon's Hold rather than Dragonstone or Old Town. He transformed the wooden Aegon's Hold into the Red Keep, a symbol of power in Westeros. Aegon's conquest was ignited by the requests and provocations of the King of the Stormlands, and the legendary tale of House Targaryen was about to continue unfolding on this ancient land. The future of Westeros became unpredictable with the arrival of this Dragon King. Aegon Targaryen's war to conquer Westeros swept across the entire continent like a storm. His 3 dragons soared through the skies, instilling fear in all his enemies. Except for Dorne, there was little on this land that could withstand his power. However, Dorne's independence and resistance became a thorn in Aegon's side that he could not overlook. Dorne, located at the southernmost tip of Westeros, is renowned for its unique culture and people. The inhabitants, primarily descendants of the Rhoynar and Andals, did not recognize the Targaryen family's rule. Despite Aegon's successful conquest of the north, the Riverlands and other regions, ultimately becoming the king on the Iron Throne, Dorne's independence never allowed him to feel secure. After 4 years of sitting firmly on the Iron Throne, Aegon's confidence in his rule began to swell. Yet he knew that although most of Westeros was now under his control, the southern kingdom of Dorne still did not acknowledge his sovereignty. Dorne's unique geography and culture made it an undeniable and formidable foe. Aegon understood that only by conquering Dorne could he solidify his kingdom completely. As long as we conquer Dorne, we can establish Targaryen authority in every kingdom, he muttered to himself before the throne, memories of the glorious days spent with dragons flashing through his mind. Aegon decided to declare war on Dorne, gathering his armies and calling forth his dragons once more. At first, the war did not progress as he had hoped. Although his army was powerful, the fierce resistance of the Dornish people and their strong land defenses led to numerous stalemates in the battles. Dorne's queen, the proud and brave Nymeria, led her people in resisting the invaders. Her strategies were flexible and cunning, often taking advantage of Dorne's complex terrain to set ambushes and deal heavy blows to the Targaryen forces. Casualties mounted on both sides, yet the war seemed endless. After many clashes, Aegon realized he was not just facing an enemy army, but a people with steadfast beliefs and strong resolve. He began to understand that relying solely on his armies and dragons would not easily conquer this land. Each morning, battles commenced and ended at dusk, leaving both sides with nothing but fatigue and anxiety. By the 10th year of Aegon's reign, the situation of the war grew increasingly dire, with both sides suffering greater losses. Despite the Targaryen army's aerial advantage, the Dornish people's steadfast defenses made every attack exceedingly difficult. In a crucial battle, Aegon decided to launch a massive offensive aimed at the Dornish stronghold of Sunspear. This fortress was seen as a symbol of Dorne. Capturing it would mean controlling the heart of Dorne. Aegon's resolve to win burned brightly within him. Yet this war would take an unexpected turn at the moment he least wanted. In the chaos of battle, Aegon's sister Rhaenys and her dragon, Vhagar, were targeted by Dornish archers. Although the dragon could survey the battlefield from above, the enemy's familiarity with defensive tactics allowed them to set a cunning trap. In that moment, an arrow cut through the air, striking Rhaenys and Vhagar, who fell in a blaze of fire, vanishing from the battlefield. This event struck Aegon like a sharp blade, piercing deeply into his heart. He could hardly believe that his family and strength had suffered such a blow from such a powerful adversary. Rhaenys' death made him realize that the Dornish resistance was fiercer than he had anticipated. "I cannot lose more family," Aegon whispered in the quiet of night, his gaze vacant. his emotions roiled like a turbulent sea in a storm. Rhaenys' death not only cost him a beloved sister, but also made him aware that conquering Dorne was not just a simple military endeavor. It was a struggle of faith and will. The Dornish fought for their land and freedom, and that conviction was irreplaceable. Perhaps I need to reconsider the meaning of this war, Aegon reflected in the darkness, feeling a stir from deep within his soul. He began to understand that true rule could only be achieved through understanding and respect, not merely through flames and blades. From that moment on, Aegon resolved not to rely solely on military might to conquer Dorne, but to seek a deeper solution for true unity. The flames of war still burned, but within him grew a different hope and determination. With the death of Queen Nymeria, a new prince finally signed a treaty with Aegon to ensure Dorne's independence for nearly 200 years to come. This left Aegon's rule in Westeros incomplete, although his power was solidified in other regions. It marked the beginning of a golden age for the Targaryen dynasty on the Iron Throne. In 129 AC, the splendor of House Targaryen once illuminated all of Westeros, but as time passed, the corruption of power quietly took root. The era of peace led royal family members to gradually lower their guard, with original unity replaced by individual ambitions and greed. Familial bonds were slowly consumed by the struggle for power, and once tight connections quietly frayed in the undercurrents. In royal gatherings, the laughter and toasts on the surface masked the hidden conflicts. Behind every smile could lie a conspiracy, and every blessing might conceal a blade. The struggle for succession within House Targaryen escalated, far more complex and dangerous than outsiders could imagine. Against this backdrop, the flames of civil war quietly ignited. Factions began to secretly vie for the throne, sparks of conflict flying until they eventually ignited the entire kingdom's turmoil. Known as the Dance of the Dragons, this civil war swept through with the fury of a storm, leading two factions of House Targaryen into a bloody battle for the Iron Throne. The war's trumpet sounded on a tranquil morning, and the air in the palace was thick with tension. Various factions began to gather, vowing to seek revenge for their families. Once cherished kin had now become the deadliest foes. Brothers turned against brothers, and sisters against sisters, as blood relations became fragile in the whirlpool of power. In this civil war, betrayals within the family made the conflict even more complex. Some members, driven by the pursuit of power, betrayed former alliances, even pushing their own kin into the abyss. People often conspired quietly in the night, having become tragic protagonists in their own stories. I will never let you sit on that throne. One night, former brothers faced off under the moonlight, anger and hatred swirling in the air. In the moment their swords clashed, they realized that kinship had long been devoured by the desire for power. Blood flowed across every inch of land in this war, and the once glorious kingdom fell into endless suffering and despair. The Targaryen dragons roared in the skies, but even dragons could not save the family's fate. The brutality of war severely weakened the family's power, and the number of dragons plummeted. The former might become a mere wish. However, the end of the civil war did not bring peace. The post-war Targaryens were battered and bruised. their remaining power clinging to life in fear. The once great splendor and glory turned to ashes, leaving the family's future hanging by a thread. Once proud of their 30 dragons, only 4 remained. This was not only a loss of power, but also a critical factor in House Targaryen's decline in Westeros. The trauma of war and the resulting issues from inbreeding led to mental health problems within the family, most notably represented by the later Mad King, Aerys Targaryen, whose madness ultimately led to Jaime Lannister's act of kingslaying, leaving the Iron Throne forever out of his grasp. Aegon's War of Conquest was glorious, but behind that brilliance lay the seeds of power corruption and family conflict. Although House Targaryen once established a powerful rule in Westeros, they ultimately could not escape the shadow of power and the fate of history. In this ancient land, all heroes and legends must face the test of time. In the long history of Westeros, the story of the Iron Throne is like a grand tapestry filled with heroes, conspiracies, and tragedies. From glory to decline, all of this is closely tied to a few kings and their choices. Aegon Targaryen was the first king to sit on the Iron Throne. With unparalleled strength and wisdom, he led his family to conquer the 7 kingdoms, establishing Targaryen rule. The Iron Throne symbolized power and glory in his hands, yet Aegon understood that the true strength of the throne lay not only in dragons and battles, but also in governance and responsibility. Among the subsequent kings, the most notorious was the Mad King, Aerys Targaryen. In the early years of his reign, the kingdom prospered, but as time went on, the corruption of power and the deterioration of his mental state led him toward madness. Aerys's tyranny provoked countless enemies, culminating in Jaime Lannister's act of kingslaying, plunging House Targaryen into deep crisis and shaking the symbolic significance of the Iron Throne. After Aerys's rule, the kingdom underwent the War of the Usurper, with various nobles and families competing for power. During this period, the Iron Throne became not a symbol of royal authority, but the epicenter of numerous conspiracies and bloody struggles. Many families slaughtered one another, even at the cost of his own blood. With the decline of the Targaryen family, the authority of the Iron Throne has gradually weakened. A new dynasty has emerged, and a new game of power has begun. Although the Iron Throne is still located in King's Landing, its glory and power are no longer there. Instead, it is replaced by stories about power, betrayal, and revenge. The rise and fall of the Iron Throne is a history full of legends and tragedies. The choices and fate of each king are part of this huge story. If you are interested in these histories, or if there are other A Song of Ice and Fire stories you want to hear, please leave a message to tell us. We will continue to tell you the wonderful chapters of Westeros. Thank you very much for your likes and comments. Your support is very important to us.